Hi guys, it's Mark Zickery, Mr. Sci-Fi, also known as Mark Zickery of Space Command, and I just learned of the passing of my friend Richard Hatch, who gained fame in Battlestar Galactica, both versions of it, and we're going to talk about that. He died of pancreatic cancer at 71. It's a big shock. He looked terrific. He seemed healthy every time I saw him. He was a member of the round table that I run. I had seen him many times. We had talked often, and I'd seen him, of course, at conventions for years and years and years. And I just wanted to talk about him and remember him, and it's very sad and very shocking. He looked great. He was 71, but he sure didn't look it. You'd think meeting him that he was in his 50s at the latest, and a good-looking and healthy 50s, a vibrant 50s. He's a very handsome man and a wonderful actor, just a wonderful actor. So let's talk about him a little. And he was a great guy, by the way. When he would be at conventions, he'd have a table and sign photographs and talk, and very friendly to the fans, very open. I saw him at conventions all across the country, and he was always very complimentary to me, very friendly, very warm. He thought the table that I run, with thousands of members from, writers, directors, actors, producers, he loved being part of it. He loved the fact that it existed, that there was a compassionate place in Hollywood, and he was a very kind man and a really good guy. And we had been talking about him appearing in Space Command, and he was someone I never say that I'm going to hire someone or utilize them if I don't mean it. But the problem, of course, is when you're writing a story, you have to wait until the right role comes. It can't just be plugging them in. And I was definitely going to utilize him, but sadly we didn't get there, and I'm really sad about that. But more importantly, it's funny. I was talking to someone the other day about why we do what we do and why we work so hard in creating the work. And I said to them, there's two kinds of people. There are people who just come in, and whether it's right or not, it's like, well, you hired me and I'm done, and it's not right yet, but I'm gone. And I hate those people, and I hate working with those people, and I try not to work with those people. But then there's the other kind of person where it's like, I'm going to work on this until it's right, because it's what you do. You give it your all. And whether I was writing Smurfs or Space Command or Star Trek The Next Generation or any of the things I've worked on, you give it your all. You aim for the fences. My friend Frank Spotnitz, who created Man in the High Castle, says good enough is never good enough. And I absolutely agree with this. And Richard Hatch certainly did. He threw himself into everything. He was quite wonderful that way. So let's talk about Richard for a few minutes. He rose to prominence in the original Battlestar Galactica, the one starring Lauren Green. He played Captain Apollo, and he was very distinctive and very handsome and young and cocky and just very quite wonderful. I mean, there was a reason he was famous. There was a reason he was successful, and the show succeeded. And for those who grew up loving it, it's great. If you're a kid, things are. You don't look at something whether it's cheesy or not. You say, I just love this. This is something that speaks to my heart, and I think that's quite wonderful. For some of it, it's Star Trek, for some Star Wars, and for some it was Battlestar Galactica. For millions, and Battlestar Galactica came into existence because Star Wars debuted, and television, being what it is, wanted something like Star Trek on TV. And so Glenn Larson, who was a protege of my friend Doug Hayes, the great director of The Twilight Zone, Glenn Larson created Battlestar Galactica, and it went on to great success. And then as TV shows do, it went off the air, and for many decades they were trying to revive it. And Richard Hatch himself put his own money into a projected Battlestar Galactica sequel called Battlestar Galactica: The Second Coming, and he shot a wonderful trailer showing what that show would have been. And you can actually go onto YouTube and watch it. Thank God for YouTube. All the things that we never used to see, all the things that used to be hidden pilots and all sorts of stuff, now you can see on YouTube. Old TV shows from the 50s, etc. But Battlestar Galactica, and it shows the Battlestar Galactica: The Second Coming, and it shows exactly what he had in mind. And although it's not of the depth or brilliance of Ron Moore's Battlestar Galactica, it's quite fun, and it would have been a show that would have delighted millions. But sadly, Universal didn't buy it, because that's not how TV works, sadly. TV works in a very strange way. They often hire people who are not necessarily right for the job, but just people who are part of their in crowd. That's why you get so many bad shows. And whereas someone who has the heart and the enthusiasm and the audience following may well not get their shows on the air. There's many, many wonderful shows that should have seen the light of day but didn't. And it's fascinating because, as the writer of The Twilight Zone Companion, the author of The Twilight Zone Companion, I know that even Rod Serling had to write 4 pilot scripts of Twilight Zone before he got that on the air. And he was the top writer working in television. He had enormous clout back in the late 50s, and it took him, even he had to write 4 pilots before the show got on the air. And so Richard Hatch, even though he was a TV star, he wasn't sort of an insider in terms of showrunners. And so, I probably could have told him back in 1999 when he tried to get that off the ground that it wasn't going to fly, even though it should have. It should have. And but then Universal kept trying to develop it over many years. Many of my friends actually took a crack at developing Battlestar Galactica, and finally Ron Moore, did his version, and it was terrific. And it's fascinating because at one point when Ron was working on Battlestar Galactica, he had written a number of pilots that some of them had gotten shot, some not, but they hadn't gone to series. And Ron told me that he had the idea that rather than continuing to write original after original after original and putting his heart into it and having it not go to series, his idea was to take a property that the studio already owned and already wanted to develop and turn that toward what he wanted to talk about, to write what he wanted to write, but utilizing an already existing property. And that was a brilliant idea, because with Battlestar Galactica, he wanted to comment on 9/11 and torture and all the things that were happening in our world and put it in a science fiction context. And he did so brilliantly. It's a terrific show. It's one of the few science fiction shows where the reboot is better, in my opinion, than the original. Sometimes, as with Star Trek and Star Trek The Next Generation, you can bring a show back and it can succeed again and be good. But Ron did something miraculous, which was he saw something that had been, in my opinion, not great and made it great. And fortunately, he also saw the gold in them there hills and hired Richard Hatch to play Tom Zarek, who was a politician who I strongly advise everyone to go back and watch those episodes with Richard Hatch in them of Ron Moore's Battlestar Galactica, because it showed a politician who had no respect for democracy, no respect for human life, and was capable of doing anything, but was very charismatic. And his followers go down a road that leads to terrible, terrible actions, and that's not what they intend, but that's what happens ultimately because of a leader who doesn't have a sense of moral responsibility. And I'm not going to draw parallels with the modern day, but I think if you watch those Battlestar Galactica episodes, you can draw your own conclusions about how they're even more relevant now than when they were made. And Richard Hatch portrayed Ron Moore's character of Tom Zarek. And by the way, in those episodes, Richard Hatch was spectacular. He was so good. He played a dashing hero, and here he was in the reboot of Battlestar Galactica playing a very subtle and very interesting sociopathic villain, and he was just wonderful. And there was no sense of him mugging or resting on his laurels. This was an actor who was really bringing all of his muscles, all of his heart, all of his commitment to a role, and he was terrific in it. He was great, and it's funny because when we lose someone like Richard Hatch, you want to, the great part, and the reason I was talking about aiming for the fences and good enough is never good enough was because I was saying to a friend of mine, the reason we do it and the reason we put our all into it is because if you do it right, you create work that's meaningful to millions of people, that stands the test of time, that lasts forever, and it outlives you. And with Richard Hatch, that's exactly what's happened. I'm writing the new edition of The Twilight Zone Companion, and so I'm thinking about this a lot because I'm writing about old friends like Richard Matheson and George Clayton Johnson and Doug Hayes and on and on, Theodore Sturgeon, all these friends of mine who are gone, and all the people I interviewed for The Twilight Zone Companion who are gone. And yet the work stands, the work remains, the work continues to be meaningful, to comment on our world, to teach us and move us and make us better. And Richard Hatch in his work did exactly that. And something else you can watch of his work that again shows what a fine actor and thoughtful actor he was and really gives you an impression of him as a person is Prelude to Axanar. Prelude to Axanar is a fan film that has been much in the news. Paramount sued to stop the Axanar feature from being made, but Prelude to Axanar is a 20-minute prequel that's done documentary style, and Richard Hatch plays a Klingon, which is really fun to see him in the Star Trek universe. And and he's quite wonderful, just charismatic, interesting, really doing a great job playing a fully rounded character. And he was going to be in the Axanar feature. He was going to be one of the leads in that. Sadly, Paramount stepped in, and whatever your feelings about Axanar and all of the nonsense around it, it's really a shame that Richard Hatch didn't get to do that role. I think he would have been just phenomenal. And now they're settling with Paramount, and they may shoot a 30-minute version of Axanar, but sadly, Richard Hatch won't be part of it. So I just wanted to kind of remember a friend and an incredibly talented actor, and I'm so glad that he worked in a medium where people will get to know him and people will get to see what he could do and what he did. You know, it's funny, we're so lucky to live in this time because it's only for the last 100 years or so that we've been able to capture this work on film where it lasts for generations. You know, we can't see Edwin Booth or Burbage or any of these actors from previous centuries. We can't see their work. We can just hear that they were terrific. Sarah Bernhardt, all these people. She was in silent films, but that didn't capture what she did on stage. And yet, with Richard Hatch and George Takei and all these phenomenal actors, James Hong, etc., we get to watch them again and again. So that's it for now. I just want to share this. It's a sad moment, but I'm thinking about Richard and I'm remembering him, and we won't be able to hang around and pal around and make our plans for Space Command, but I can put on Battlestar Galactica and at least spend time with him in that way. So thank you very much. We'll talk again soon, and hopefully it'll be on a happier note. Take care. Bye-bye.